I'm Alex Moazed, and welcome to Winner Take All, where we talk about the constant battle between large tech monopolies and traditional incumbents. I'm excited to have Principal at Applico, co-author with me on the book, Modern Monopolies, Nick Johnson, join us today. Good morning, Nick. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Good to be here.
One of the topics we wanted to get into, it's been a little bit, COVID has made it a little bit more challenging for us to, get together like we used to. But one of the topics that we wanted to go over was kind of just taking a step back, looking at, the book is called Modern Monopolies, but there is a gap, right, between being a dominant platform business and really having that kind of monopoly status. And I know you've looked at, this piece that screen sharing it here that CB Insights came out with recently called Visualizing Tech Giants' Billion-Dollar Acquisitions. They've got a nice little chart here, showing some of the notable billion-dollar plus acquisitions by FAMGA in the past 20 years. What's your overlay on all of this? How do you think about M&A for these tech monopolies?
I think there's a few different things they've done. Some is what I would call accretive acquisitions that help build their existing network. Facebook, for example, just bought this customer company or is trying to buy them. That would be pretty accretive to what they're trying to do and build more support, I think, with small businesses and these kinds of things. The other would be, for example, their Instagram acquisition or WhatsApp, which is we go buy another platform business, which is its own separate network, and then basically plug that into Facebook's network to help it get scale. And that's both the advertising network as well as the user network. There's, I'd say broadly two different types of acquisitions that big platform companies are doing. Most of the major billion-dollar ones, YouTube would be another example. Twitch would be we go buy another platform company. But there are some big ones that are in there as well that are these kind of accretive tech acquisitions.
And we talk a lot about on the show having that platform conglomerate status and how that is a big milestone, particularly on the journey to monopoly, right? We've talked a lot about like Uber versus Lyft and how Uber has platform conglomerate status, and we've seen how that differentiation, that diversity of multiple platform business models has just set them up so much better going into COVID and now, hopefully coming out of COVID. When you look at that former bucket of doing M&A to buy kind of adjacent or related platforms that share network value synergies, that allow you to kind of supercharge the network of the acquired entity with your existing network, like Facebook and Instagram, Facebook and WhatsApp, etc. And you think about build versus buy. I mean, Uber Eats was really a build, right? Then I think they started that business from scratch, but that was really a Travis Kalanick. That was started way back early in the Uber days, kind of like Google starting, Gmail. When you're a smaller, you as the business, Google, Uber, et cetera, are just much smaller, more nimble, and you kind of are able to do more of that build, I guess, and have it be organic and successful. Versus once you really get much larger as a business, whether you're a platform business or any business, do you really see build? Do we see any of these kind of you're at 10 billion, somewhere in the $10 billion, 10 plus $billion valuation range? Like, do we see them actually doing build, or is it pretty much M&A is the way for them to kind of do platform conglomerate or, now have multiple platforms and get on that journey?
I think Amazon Business would be another one that went the build path. I think that's a pretty huge one from our point of view. I think it's certainly rarer that you see that. I think a lot of this tends to happen from M&A, but I think Uber Eats is interesting because it got pretty big, but now it's bought Postmates and then Deliv or Drizzly? Drizzly, yeah, for alcohol. Those are both $1 billion plus acquisitions that are growing that business. So it's not necessarily either or. Google started Google Maps and then they bought Waze. Whereas the other example would be they bought YouTube because their video product sucked, frankly, and they couldn't scale it up, so they had to do that. I think Google is, for example, of a company that hasn't done a lot of stuff organically. Even Android, for example, they bought that company and then it turned it into something that way beyond what Android was. So there's a few different stages of acquisitions. There's, you buy a kind of mature platform company, or you buy kind of the seed of it and then scale it up. I would say the vast majority of these kind of additional networks that these conglomerates are adding are probably via M&A, at least to some degree. But there are examples like Amazon, like Facebook. Facebook Messenger would be another example that they've kind of grown these new networks successfully, organically, more or less.
I think Amazon Business is as a counterpoint that it isn't exclusively M&A, that you can do build. M&A might be a little bit easier from an execution standpoint, a little bit more expensive, certainly, but not completely ruling out build once you're in that kind of mid-tier platform size. I think those are very good points. This was another one that I thought was interesting, looking at marketplaces as economies, and this article kind of lining up. You got Amazon Marketplace here at $300 billion in GDP. Shopify, 119. They don't really have like GMV, I guess, in the traditional sense like in Amazon, but they still have them here. eBay at 100 billion. And basically they line them up and say, look at how big these businesses are by throughput relative to the GDP of other countries like Amazon Marketplace has more GDP than South Africa.
To add in there too, what would Google or Apple look like? A little bit harder to quantify, but they'd be pretty big too.
I mean, you could also put Walmart on this list, even though, Walmart, not really a platform business, not in PLAT yet. And that's going to be the next thing we talk about, but still pretty interesting to kind of think about just the scale that these things get to and that winner take all dynamic. But even when we look at Amazon Marketplace, they have multiple revenue streams. And that's the next topic that we wanted to get into, is how to think that these platform businesses, they're massive entities. They have multiple revenue streams. And you can't just look at them and say that they have, they're a platform, they got one revenue streams. Actually, some of the best platform businesses have multiple revenue streams. And actually, you could say multiple business models. It's not just a platform business model. How would you describe that?
Yeah, that's kind of that hybrid model. If we go back to the acquisition piece, one of the big ones on that acquisition landscape is Whole Foods, for example, which Amazon used to help launch itself in a more meaningful way into the food and grocery space. So I think that there are kind of hybrids that we're seeing more and more of, where linear business plus platform business can be stronger together. I think, another example of a business like that, Apple, of course, they make and sell phones and then have the App Store, which really is the reason why a lot of people buy a lot of those phones, is the software in that ecosystem. So I think that hybrid business model can work very well together. And you're seeing more and more platforms kind of embrace that as they get bigger. In
talking about platform revenue as it relates to PLAT. PLAT is WisdomTree's Growth Leaders Fund. We've licensed data to, full disclosure, to WisdomTree to help in the creation of that financial instrument, that ETF, and the fund behind, or the index behind the fund. But to do that, and what I've got here is some of the investment materials on PLAT. And what this document explains is there are many different types of platform businesses. In the book that Nick and I co-authored, we describe a variety of different types of platform business models, and you can actually see those listed here on this farmost left column. But what those platform models map to is actually, if you go to Applico's blog and you look at our, what is a platform business blog article, or you go read this great book, this is actually an image in the book which breaks down the different platform types and platform business models underneath that, right? So let's start with, how would you kind of describe the different ways that we bucketed platform business models, and why we, created these different depictions?
Reason we did that as well, a lot of platforms, they have kind of the same core functions, which we describe in the book, and they all have this kind of core transaction. The way those operate can be very different depending on kind of the type of platform. So that's why we tried to basically classify and create a categorization of what are all these different types of platform businesses out there, because some of them look very similar and are doing pretty much similar things, even though their business models might be slightly different. So how do we make sense of this? And basically the way we did that at a high level is based on how their core transaction works. So the simplest one that we have is basically exchange versus maker. The idea here on the exchange side is pretty much there's a one-to-one transaction happening here. There's some kind of limited inventory. So for example, if I buy an item on Amazon, there's a limited number of that widget that exists if it's a physical product in that marketplace. So that is, a product marketplace is an example of an exchange platform. Another service marketplace, if I book a car on Uber, there's one of that car. It's not like 100 other people can book that car at the same time. On the flip side, the maker platforms, whether that's typically apps, software, or content, it has this broadcast dynamic. It's one to many rather than one to one. If I watch a video on YouTube, basically as many other people as the servers can possibly handle can watch that video at the same time. The interaction can be asynchronous. There's no reason that other people can't consume it. In the terms of economists, it's not sort of a rivalrous good, meaning anyone can enjoy it at the same time. There's this kind of one to infinite almost dynamic. So that's kind of the main split. And then within that, we categorize it basically on what kind of value is being exchanged in the core transaction. So you've got development platforms of a few different permutations. You've got content platforms. On the other side, you've got product and service marketplaces, investment platforms where it's a financial product being exchanged. And based on what kind of value is being exchanged in that core transaction, that's really how we classified these.
For each one of these buckets, it means that, at a high level, they're all platform businesses. But when you actually look at a service marketplace versus a product marketplace, it's actually a different business model. And I think that was the point from our first topic for today, was that when you see these platforms do, M&A, they're actually kind of buying these adjacent business models many times. Sometimes those are different platform types. Sometimes it's a similar platform type in a different part of the industry. But every one of these platform types is actually a very different business model. There's a lot of differences between how a marketplace for services operates versus a marketplace for products. Both are marketplaces. One's facilitating services, one products.
Right.
Lots of difference in the nuance of how that business operates to be successful. So when going back to PLAT and the index, what we looked at is how do you figure out revenue derived from that platform model? Because these businesses are now massive. They may have multiple revenue streams. And so now I'm going back to this WisdomTree material here, where we talk about 9 different platform models. And we talk about how their platform revenue is essentially calculated and attributed to these different business models. How would you help map our depiction of different platform types to, how we think about platform revenue differently?
Yeah, I think what you see is the ones that have a sort of real world component to the business have a lot more infrastructure costs and these kind of things. So product marketplaces and service marketplace, for example. And with that, then you tend to get a lot more linear components to the business, because they have to operate in the real world, where there still are a lot of the analog world, I should say, where there's still a lot of linear businesses operating very successfully. So Amazon buying Whole Foods, perfect example. You've seen the same thing in China, where Alibaba has invested in grocery stores and logistics operations, and the kind of messy real world that makes the digital platform piece of this work. So the revenue threshold that we have, for example, in our database is lower in terms of the requirement for percent of platform revenue. Amazon would be a perfect example of this, where they have a big linear business, but a lot of what the linear business does, particularly on the marketplace side, on the retail side is basically serve as almost kind of a loss leader and network builder for the marketplace, where Amazon makes historically much higher margins.
So just to clarify, the platform revenue would be the revenue coming from the take rate on the marketplace on the GMV. The linear revenue would be what Amazon is selling and reselling as a 1P, as a first party seller, where they're taking that inventory onto balance sheet and then reselling it. And then, where would like warehouse rental or these other kind of like services they layer on? Are those like 1P, or those marketplace, or those in between?
Yeah, I think the what we would call kind of ancillary services to the marketplace. So there are different ways that platforms monetize. There's typically three main ones. One is a take rate. You take a percentage of the value of transactions going through. The second is advertising. So you basically created this network and then you monetize it by bringing a third party that pays for access. And then the other one would be basically value-added services to participants in the network. You can see that in some cases, like on Twitch, you can get freemium, kind of subscriptions where you get extra stickers and emotes and these kinds of things and channels. The flip side of that would be tools to creators. So Etsy has a lot of the way their revenue is scaled up, providing shipping services and help running your business to the small businesses that operate on Etsy. So those kind of value-added services would be platform revenue because they're derived from the network itself.
Right. The only reason that you can actually have those value-added services is because of the scale and the dominance of the marketplace. In this case, the marketplace model, or the platform business model. The obvious things would be considered platform revenue, like take rate. But then the things that are built around that platform also would be also considered platform revenue. The stuff that is, literally linear. I don't know. There's just no other way to describe it. You buy a product, you resell the product. That would not be considered platform revenue. Although when you look at the overall revenue of an Amazon, their linear revenue drastically outpaces, at least when we look at the marketplace. AWS, a little different beast, but at least when we look at the marketplace, they have more linear revenue than they do platform revenue, right? Because the platform revenue is higher margin, but it's a take rate off of more throughput. There's more marketplace GMV throughput than there is linear throughput. But when you look at how revenue is defined and calculated, it's actually lower platform revenue than there is linear revenue. Is that right?
Yeah, part of that is an artifact of just how accounting is done, and for good reason. So when you're looking at revenue for Amazon, it's gross revenue, gross sales for the 1P business. For the 3P business, revenue is net revenue, which is essentially not the gross sales, but the gross sales minus whatever portion you give to the merchant for that sale. So it's basically just the take rate plus services that Amazon keeps itself as revenue. So it's not necessarily apples to apples. If you're looking at throughput, it's GMV to gross sales. And then the reason that distinction is important, it means platform revenue is way, 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 way higher margin than the linear revenue. So while Amazon has, putatively more linear revenue that has much smaller margins on that much bigger pie, and then much greater margins on the sort of smaller pie of revenue it gets from the platform. But if you're doing kind of apples to apples, which Mr. Bezos has thankfully done for us, as he said, the third party sellers are kicking our butt. So on the retail business, it's the lion's share of the throughput is third party sellers, even though the majority of the revenue is that if you look at the income statement is from 1P, just because of how it gets recognized on an income statement.
I think that's a great breakdown. Bringing it full circle back to Walmart. Walmart has some marketplace transactions going on. Walmart overall has over $500 billion in revenue. So, they haven't broken out for us what portion of that $500 billion is essentially take rate revenue from their marketplace third-party sales. They obviously have, the majority of their linear revenue isn't just e-commerce. It's actually physically selling products in their stores. But that means that what Walmart would need to represent to be considered a platform and then included in the index and then in PLAT, we would need to start to see a material level of platform revenue, which would mean that their marketplace business, the GMV, the take rate from the marketplace. So even if they have a lot of marketplace GMV, but let's say they only have a 1% take rate. Well, then that means that the business actually isn't strong enough to consider them a platform, even if they have a lot of GMV, because they can't charge a large enough take rate, which means they just don't have as much leverage. They're not really a platform business. So once they hit a certain threshold, which is what we monitor and part of the service that we're providing in the relationship with WisdomTree, is to figure out when is that platform business big enough as a part of Walmart that we could actually consider them to have a real platform business going, and then they could be included. Is that essentially what we're monitoring? Is that how you think about it for why Walmart isn't in the index, but could be in the future?
Yeah, I think it's at what point basically is the platform business within the broader group a big enough part of that sort of revenue and income mix that it's materially driving the results and the value of that business. I think it's certainly making an impact, but we would view Walmart still as a majority linear business. I think that's going to change in the next 5 years probably, and I would be shocked if they're not in PLAT 5 years from now. But today they're still not there, and it's still vast majority linear business. That's been their business for decades. And very successfully. So that's not to knock them. They do it very well. It just means that they're not, not big enough as a platform yet to be really considered a full-on platform business.
Great. So what that means is next 5 years would be by 2026, which would mark 10 years since they bought Jet.com. So if that is possible, if Walmart can go from hardcore linear analog retailer to platform business officially in PLAT within 10 years, I would easily say for Doug McMillon, Mark Laurie, the team, the now departed Mark Laurie, that is probably one of, if not the best business transformations of the past 50 years. So we'll see. Hopefully it does come true, because we're gunning for Walmart here and trying to have some more balance against these tech monopolies. But Nick, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hope to get you back on the show more often here. Great having you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, that's it for us today on Winner Take All. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you soon.